Good afternoon. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources that we hope will help improve your life. I'm Stu Reid. Here's my co-host, Dave Burstein. Hey, Dave.
Hello.
Yeah,
We were
so,
we were both at the station last week for a special event. Why don't
yeah,
you tell us about it?
it was a big deal. We had our ninth annual Harlem Emergency Preparedness Day last Thursday. This is an event that we started shortly after Superstorm Sandy in 2013 as a way to push out information about emergency communications with the Harlem community. Just a quick recap, Dave. One of the things that happened during Sandy is that there was a dearth of communication about what was going on in Harlem, in Far Rockaway, and in other black and brown communities that were not tied into the major communication systems, which tends to report on Midtown and other neighborhoods. And so there was a dearth of information. And another thing that happened is that WHCR, which we broadcast in 90.3 FM, usually is pushing out information to the community about what's going on in real time. And the on-air personalities were unable to get into the station during the storm to report. And even had they been able to get in, we had no mechanism yet set up at that time for them to collect information about what was going on in the community. So as a result of all of that, we got together, Angela Hart, the general manager of the station, and Wally Abdul Noor, previous engineer of the station, and some others, community activists and emergency preparedness professionals, and we started the WHCR emergency broadcast team. And essentially, we train folks that are located out in the community to operate and use mobile and walkie-talkie radios, and created a network of information gatherers that then reported back to WHCR Radio about what was going on. They talked to each other as well as to the radio station. We train folks in protocols on how to use the radios. There's a whole language that is appropriate for talking on mobile radios. And we also created a way to remote into the radio station, Dave, so that we could go on air with updates, with information, without physically being in the station. So all of that is just kind of an evolution of WEBT, the WHCR Emergency Broadcast Team. And as I said, we've been doing the Emergency Preparedness Day event as a way to share this information with the community. So last Thursday, we had folks from Harlem Hospital that came in. They've been a partner with us for many years, and they talked about fire safety, how to use extinguishers and how to get them refilled, how to fight fires with the extinguishers, how to evacuate a building, when to evacuate during a fire, and other fire safety tips. Great response. There were so many questions and answers, Dave, during that session that I had to cut them off because there was so much back and forth from the audience, of which there was a substantial audience in the room. And just coincidentally, not coincidentally, but we were also live streaming the event. And before I forget to mention it, a recording of that live stream is available on our website at WHCREBT.org. That's WHCREBT.org. And I'd recommend that folks check it out. It's broken down into segments, so if you're interested in one particular area or another, more than one, you can skip around and see the segment that you're interested in. So in addition to fire safety, we had the Fire Department of New York came in and did CPR demonstrations with actual mannequins where folks got on the floor and practiced the compression technique of CPR. That was a big deal. Folks again had many questions about when to do it, when not to do it, and some of the do's and don'ts of CPR. We had the New York City Emergency Management, NYSEM, came in and talked about preparing your family for emergencies. talked about go bags, talked about evacuation, talked about an emergency checklist. Great stuff. We had Carol Johnson from the East Harlem COAD that talked about seniors and the special needs of seniors during emergencies. We had the Harlem Emergency Network that talked about radio communications, emergency communications, walkie-talkies. And one young lady who has trained herself and become an expert in ham radio, Dave, something that we've talked about on and off on the air. The most basic and oldest of all radio systems, that's a global system, ham radio, still exists. And it's a way when all technology is down, when the phones are down, when the internet is down, when the power is down. If you have your ham radio charged up, you can talk on that ham radio and communicate with folks in your community and way beyond, potentially across the globe. So it was a very informative session, a lot of Q&As. We had Doug Frazier from the Smart Community Initiative came on and talked about emergency communication systems, talked about different technologies that are in place at City College, as well as in various public housing locations around the city where the Smart Community Initiative and Digital Divide partners are working with public housing residents to provide emergency communications, something we call a resident public safety teaching network, which is a way to keep communities informed and talking to each other about what's going on in their community over networks and facilities that they themselves control, essentially empowering our communities to take control of our own public safety, which is the overall mission of WEBT. So overall, it was a very informative and exciting affair. Some folks that have been with us over the 9 years said they thought it was the best one ever, Dave. So I was very happy to be a part of it. And again, I want to thank our many listeners that were there that came out to support us. And of course, Angela Harden, the general manager, Tina Dixon, the program director, and so many folks on the staff, the volunteer staff, mind you, of WHCR Radio that came out to support the effort. And thanks most of all to our listeners out there who came out in droves and were there to experience the 9th Annual Harlem Emergency Preparedness Day. Thank you. And Dave, I think that may have been the first one that you actually came to, was it not?
Yep, I came, and I even got a chance to put my 2 cents in.
Okay.
Stu and Doug were up front talking about their work. I didn't belong in this. I haven't done public safety particularly, but I came up because I'm with them on the show, and I had one thing to say. I first met Stu and Doug 25 years ago when they were bringing broadband to the South Bronx and nobody else was. This was before the cable companies and Verizon got there. They have been more active in community broadband than almost anyone in the country. They're not famous in the broadband world, although they should be because they're actually getting stuff done. And it gives you a sense of how things become news. How do you hear about things? Usually it's because they're promoted. And Doug and Stu are just not into promoting themselves. So I have to give them the plug.
Well, thank you, Dave. We're not about self-promoting. We're about, promoting the folks that we service and about servicing the people. Well, let me just throw out a couple of websites for folks to take a look at. One is the smartci.org. That stands for the Smart Community Initiative. It's the smartci.org. And there you can see a lot of the community-based technology that we're doing. Also, ddpny.org. ddpny.org stands for Digital Divide Partners. And there you'll see more of our work. Again, we partner with local folks on the ground, and really it's their ideas and their expertise. We just kind of bring some resources to help realize solutions to the problems that they identify and solutions that they help create. Just a quick side story. One of the very first things we did, Dave, along those lines was our virtual tenant patrol. And that was started by Mr. John Johnson, who is now deceased, but he was a pioneer and a real champion in the public housing arena. He was the tenant leader at Mount Haven Houses, and also the leader of all of the South Bronx Council of Presidents. And for a while, he was also, before he got sick, he was also the chairman of the Citywide Council of Presidents, which is all of the resident associations throughout New York City in public housing. Anyway, he came to me and Doug and said, guys, I need a camera in my office so I can see what's going on in my office. And we did that. And in the midst of that, he said, we're having problems with our lobby with the seniors being afraid to come in, being accosted by folks. Is there any way to put a camera in the lobby so we can see what's going on? And we did that. And we made the camera image available to the residents themselves on their phones. And John Johnson labeled that, oh, this is a virtual tenant patrol. At the time, and even still today, there are tenant patrols or community watch folks in public housing that sit in the hallway to monitor what's going on. And as John Johnson used to say, these are mostly seniors, mostly women, and we're putting them in harm's way by putting them in the hallway. Why not put a camera there that folks ourselves, that we can monitor ourselves to see what's going on? He named it Virtual Tenant Patrol. And he also came up with the slogan, we are watching us, not we are watching you, because it's a system run and controlled by the residents themselves. We are watching us. And that was about 15 years ago. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's also somebody else who's supposed to be in those lobbies. $150 million worth of fire wardens or fire safety coordinators whose job is to be there in case there's a fire. Not so great that they're there, although that wouldn't be the first place I'd spend my money for public safety. But this is one of the things that happens in politics often. $150 million contract was given to friends of our current mayor.
Wow.
That was not part of his indictment, but there are too many stories like that around.
What we've learned is that, folks have to take control themselves. Of course, resources and money helps make it all happen. And much of the work, if not most of the work that Doug and I have been able to do going back, many years, decades or more, has been financed by the residents themselves. Now going back maybe a dozen years, 15 years, Governor David Patterson did put out some money and funded some of our early work, I guess around 29 or 2009, something like that. And he was courageous enough to put some money out there and help fund some of our community-based technology. But since then, public financing has been very difficult to find. We work with the Internet Society, of which both Dave and I and my business partner Doug and others are members. And we have been able to get some funding from them. Pre-pandemic, we got some money to help fund some of our public streaming operations that became very helpful and vital during the pandemic, where we were able to bring on many experts, medical and healthcare professionals onto our public streaming platforms and community radio stations, where folks would not otherwise have been able to get access to that kind of medical information. And that was very helpful and very useful. And we thank the Internet Society for that. One of the other things, just briefly, I mentioned during the presentation last week, we talked about mobile radios and walkie-talkies. That has become a very important way for folks to communicate as well, Dave. And in addition to being able to communicate during emergencies, one of the things, and again, this is something that the residents themselves came up with, Dave. We were training folks how to talk on the mobile radios, the language of how to sign off, and sign on and sign off. And we had a regular once a week radio check where everybody would check in with each other during a 2-hour window to make sure everybody was on top of their radio communication game, if you will, and that their devices were still working and charged, etc. And what the residents came up with, Dave, was we need to do a regular building report on the status of the heat, the hot water, and the elevators in public housing. Because so often those are critical elements that go out. You can imagine living in a high-rise building, 10, 15, 20 stories, and elevator goes out. That's a major crisis. And folks need to know about it, and folks need a way to stay on top of reporting and monitoring management's response to these problems. No heat, no hot water, no elevator service. So we have several developments that are talking to each other every morning and every evening on those 3 items, keeping track every day about what's going on in their development. We call it quality of life communications.
Let me tell a story about the problems with the elevators in public housing, some of which are very tall. My brother used to work on ambulances. He's a paramedic out of Harlem Hospital. And one day, they got to a building. No elevators were working. They had to walk up 22 stories. And then the 2 people in the ambulance had to carry a patient down 22 stories because the elevator wasn't working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
You were
happens a lot,
talking
Dave.
about
Although that's a powerful story, it is not an extraordinary story, because we have crises like that almost every day, sad to say, in public housing. I mean, I don't want to throw out the number of elevators in public housing, but I think it's a couple thousand elevators in New York City public housing, where you got a population the size of the state of Montana, where folks are dependent on those elevators working. And when they go down, and they go down a lot, we're looking at housing stock that for the most part was built in the early 1950s. So you looking at housing stock that is 60 and 70 years old. And the housing authorities had all kind of financing problems in terms of upgrading and keeping all of their systems working up to snuff. So the bottom line, folks who pay for that is the residents who live there. So it's so important to have these communication protocols and techniques and devices and systems for the residents themselves to keep track of what's going on. You talk about evacuation. The sister I mentioned, Carol Johnson, she is, I won't say wheelchair bound, but she's uses a walker to assist her ambulatory movements. And I remember the first time she came to our very first Harlem Emergency Preparedness Day event at the State Office Building in 2013. And she talked about a technique that she had used to get folks who couldn't ambulate downstairs. And that was to take a mattress and put them on the mattress and slide them down the stairs. And I was like, wow. She said, you got to be creative. You got to use what you have, and you got to figure out how to solve the problem. And that's the kind of ingenuity that our folks have, and that many of the folks on our team at the WHCR EBT have, and that we share with the community. Dave?
What Stu and Doug are doing is bringing the technology we know, because we're technologists, to the people who need it. And that's great. In fact, they talked about setting up radios. I don't know how many hundreds of lives were saved. And the Titanic, which was one of the first ships that ever had a ship-to-ship radio and got the word out to a ship that was not that far away, who came and picked up a lot of survivors.
Wow, I didn't know that, Dave.
Yeah.
Talk about ham radio operation. Uh-huh.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we just had a new technology that apparently is also saving lives. The iPhone and the Huawei phone, and now some others, are able to send messages via satellite to any ordinary phone or emergency services and so on. It's not really working to do phone calls off an ordinary phone, but on an iPhone, you can send a message out, help 1 mile north of Asheville, North Carolina, which has been inundated.
That's where that storm hit, the Storm Helene.
Yep, I think they're up to 160 people have died, and there's a whole lot of people they haven't been able to get to yet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you had an iPhone and you were a mile out of Asheville, you could send a note to the local emergency services where you were and that you needed help.
Mm-hmm. Of course, Dave, let me
That
just
is
share
the
with our
latest
audience the reason
technology.
that technology is so special is that often in storms, the cell towers get knocked out. So your regular cell phone service is not working. So what Dave is talking about is a backup service on the cell phone where the cell phone can use satellites, which are not land-based, but space-based. So they're not affected by terrestrial storms. So Dave, that's actually working in Asheville.
That is actually working, and there was a news report saying people were using it.
Wow,
It will
nice.
be available on most phones, including all of those at T-Mobile, or
Mm-hmm.
at least many of those at T-Mobile, over the next few years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be something to look for.
Yeah.
Now, other things to look for in personal emergencies are things like watches who can track your blood pressure and heart rate. Do we have time to talk about that before the break?
No, we need to take a break, Dave. But before we go, I just wanted to tie in your discussion of the iPhone use of satellites, again, with some of the technology that TSCI, the Smart Community Initiative, is using with our emergency access systems, where we do have redundant technology like satellite, like land-based radio, and multiple redundant technology so that when one type of service goes out, you're able to fall back and use another. And these are technologies that we are in partnership with the residents starting to put into public housing that is under the control of the resident leadership so that they have a way to communicate with each other and with the outside world in an emergency. So thank you for bringing that up, Dave, because that ties in
We've
so well.
got some really good stories coming after the break, so don't go away. Come back after the music.
Okay. This is Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid. Stay tuned. Be right back.
Autumn in New York, why does it seem so inviting? Autumn in New York, it spells the thrill of first nighting. Glittering crowds and shimmering clouds in canyons of steel, they're making me feel I'm home. It's autumn brings the promise of new love. Autumn in New York is often mingled with pain. Dreamers with empty hands may sigh for exotic lands. It's autumn in New York. It's good to live it again. Autumn in New York, the gleaming rooftops at sundown. Autumn in New York, it lifts you up when you're run down. Jaded ways and gay voices who lunch at the Ritz will tell you that it's divine. This autumn in New York transforms the slums into Mayfair. Autumn in New York, you'll need no castle in Spain. Lovers that bless the dark on benches in Central Park greet autumn in New York. It's good to live it
Okay, we're back. Community Technology, Dave Burstein and Stu Reid on WHCR 90.3 FM. Dave, we're starting a new segment every show. We're going to have a segment talking about practical stuff that folks out there can use to somehow improve the quality of life or their public safety or whatever, but practical stuff that they can use that's related to technology and or broadband. So, Dave, I know you have a couple things you wanted to bring up in that regard.
Well, I'm not rich, so I have to look for inexpensive things to go to. And over the years, I found a whole lot of free and very cheap opportunities that you can find yourself on the internet. One of them is at Lincoln Center, where they have free events with first-rate professional musicians, actors, comedians that you can get on the mailing list for. And they usually have one Thursday and one or two Saturday, and often others during the week. Lincoln Center is doing some very helpful things for those of us who can't afford $150 tickets to the Metropolitan Opera or $75 tickets to the Philharmonic. One of them is the Philharmonic, when they have unsold seats, are making them available to people for $10. You have to sign up. You have to say you get food stamps or something like that to qualify. And then you get $10 seats to one of the finest orchestras in the world. They also, on the shows they're presenting themselves, have 2 or 3 a month with world-class professional musicians. that you can pay what you want. They suggest $35, but you can pay as little as $5.
Nice.
So Lincoln Center is doing what they should do because they get hundreds of millions of dollars from the state and the city, reaching out beyond the audiences that usually go to the Philharmonic and the Met and City Ballet. Next, La Mama. La Mama is a 50-year-old or 55-year-old institution on the Lower East Side that has been presenting plays, often extraordinary, and dance and puppet shows, and is world famous. And I've caught there many folks. Andre Saban doing a fabulous Greek play with music by Liz Swados, Sam Shepard, who went on to a lot of success in Hollywood, and others you might never have heard of. A ballet company from Colombia. Never heard of them, took a chance, and they were fabulous. They have $10 seats also available. The first 10 seats of every performance go for $10.
Nice.
So if you get on the La Mama mailing list, which will send you the notice of what's coming, you can often get to see a play where every seat in the house is excellent because they only have about 8 or 10 rows of seats.
Nice. Wow.
In their theaters.
Wow.
And sometimes it's disappointing, and sometimes it's remarkable.
Mm-hmm. Now, Dave, you have some technology-related practical stuff for our listening audience as well, did you not?
Well, I decided that on the radio, I should recommend that it become possible, practical, for everybody over the age of 50 to have a smartwatch.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Why? Yeah. What is a smartwatch, Dave? What does that do?
Well, we know smartwatches. Apple was one of the first. Samsung is big into it. Huawei just got reviewed by a German magazine as the best in the world, and so on. And most of those for about $50, $50 to $75. Not the Apple, but there's plenty of others, can monitor your heart rate and your pulse ox, the percentage of oxygen in your blood.
Oh, okay. Oxygen.
Pulse ox, the percentage of oxygen in your blood.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have an irregular heartbeat, you know to go and do more than that.
Mm-hmm. So the watch sends alarms, Dave, when your numbers are not where they should be?
You can also, on somewhat more expensive ones, about $150, check your blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these are all things I've needed. Mm-hmm. About 15 years ago, I was feeling really weak. I had enough sense to call 911. The ambulance came. They put a little device on my finger, and they discovered my blood oxygen level was low.
Mm-hmm. And
they took me right down and to Lenox Hill Hospital, and I had a pulmonary embolism.
Wow. Now, had you had a smartwatch, Dave, you'd have gotten a warning. Is that how that works? Had you had a smartwatch?
The smartwatch, you could. I don't think it's constantly checking the blood oxygen, but you can just hit a button or give a command, and it will check for you.
Mm-hmm.
And embolisms are a leading cause of death.
Yeah.
If you catch it early, you're likely to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And if not, they may have to carry you out.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And that's why I'm saying that as you become older and hence more likely to have medical problems, you should have a smartwatch Ideally, the more expensive ones that can also do blood pressure. And blood pressure monitoring is probably the best way to bring down the level of heart attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that smartwatches or similar devices should be given out to everybody because they're going to save the medical system money.
Wow.
For that, for
Mm-hmm.
$50 to $150, you can catch medical emergencies that might wind up costing $35,000 in the hospital if they're not caught early.
Wow.
That's smartwatches. Oxygen
So
level.
that's some other technology related to hearing impairment that I know we talked a little bit about a few weeks ago, but maybe it's worth repeating while we're on the subject.
Well, the story we had was that the $250 Apple iPod can now work as a decent hearing aid for people with mild and moderate hearing loss.
Mm-hmm.
That the Apple iPods, what you see everybody in the subway listening to their music on, with the right software, can amplify selectively the sounds around you, i.e., bring up the tones that represent people's speech. And I pass hearing test, but my hearing is not what it used to be. And I thought that was something I should get. Well, maybe or maybe not, because I found out that the hearing aids now are down to $50 to $125.
What's down? The tests?
No, the hearing aids. Real
Hearing aids
aids.
themselves are that inexpensive now?
Yeah, you set them on you set them up with your smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
You put them to use. None of them are for heavy duty hearing loss. They're all for mild to moderate hearing loss, which something like 40% of men start getting in their 60s. And most of them are too proud.
Mm-hmm.
And when hearing aids cost $2,000 and they were so easy to lose, that was not for me because I'm really terrible about losing things.
Mm-hmm.
The technology for doing the music earbuds, which also have a little microphone in there so you can make calls, now is down to under $100 and widely available at the obvious online sources.
Nice. Wow.
That's
good. That's
very
good news, Dave.
Yep, because most people don't know. There's a whole lot of other things like this that we learn in technology that other people don't know, and we're going to be bringing them to this show as often as we can.
Yeah,
but let's go to another story.
Well, there's an interesting story, Dave, that I was not aware about, that you brought to my attention. And this is something that we talk about on and off regularly on this show, and that is UBI, or Universal or Unconditional Basic Income. And UBI basically posits that there should be a floor, an economic floor, that is available to everyone to help them get through without reference to their condition. You don't have to be poor. You don't have to be on food stamps. You don't have to qualify. It's called unconditional basic income. And what UBI advocates say is that when you are able to give that to people, that it frees them up to be more creative, to follow their passion, to become more productive and more engaged citizens. And there have been a number of experiments in the US and Europe and around the world. And for the most part, they've been very successful. And what Dave just brought to my attention was an example where the state of Utah decreased its number of chronically homeless people by 90% after implementing a program that provided a no questions asked housing to homeless people. So again,
And of course, we should be looking at that here.
Everywhere.
New York City is the richest city on earth. There is no reason we shouldn't be housing people who are now homeless.
Yeah.
In fact, it will cost very little more than we're paying now for that horrible system of homeless shelters.
Absolutely.
And we have some data on this where cost of homelessness in Maine, they set up supportive housing. And did it help? Well, it cut the cost of emergency room visits and ambulance calls by 62%. It cut healthcare cost overall by 59%. It reduced the calls to the police by 66% and reduced incarceration by 62%.
Those are whopping numbers, Dave. That's a heck
and it's
of
a small study, and they probably picked the people who are most likely to succeed. And I wouldn't expect the same numbers. But what this tells you is getting people into houses is a darn good thing, and the cost is much less than you think.
Yeah,
because it saves other costs.
Yeah, what it shows to me, Dave, is the ripple effect of taking care of people with something basic like housing. And UBI has the same type of ripple effect. When folks don't have to worry about where they're going to sleep at night or are they going to eat the next day, it decreases so many other costs around healthcare, around policing, around ambulance and incarceration and everything. The ripple effect is significant. And yes, granted, this is probably a very small sample, but I think it's indicative of the effect of these types of interventions, whether it be no questions asked housing support or whether it be universal basic income. To me, it's almost a no-brainer.
Stu, how many presidents of the United States have been Christians?
I think every single one. Or at least stated Christians, okay? They said they were.
Utter nonsense.
Practicing is a whole nother
Judaism?
Yes.
Muslims and Christians have strong commands in the holy books, some of which they share, all people of the book, to help the poor. Jesus Christ walked in the shoes of a fisherman. The New Testament talked about how hard it was for a rich man to get into heaven. There are lots of things in the religious practice that I don't respect, and lots of things I do respect. The Catholic Church in New York was in the South Bronx when I was doing reporting there, like no one else. The city government or anyone else helping people who really needed help. So, as far as I'm concerned, any president of the United States who doesn't go out of his way, and maybe soon her way, to help people in need is not a Jew or a Christian or a Muslim in substance, because a key substance for each of those religions is helping the people who need help.
I agree. Okay, well, we're not talking about religion, but we are talking about, helping humanity. And I guess Dave's point is that is the undercurrent, the underpinning, if you will, of all religions. And UBI, universal unconditional basic income, and no questions asked housing for the homeless are certainly just so
And
important to,
a remarkable thing
promoting
that
human health.
was proven in this case for housing and has been proven again and again with healthcare, with basic income, is that the cost of making sure that's there for everyone is much smaller than it would seem because it saves money on other things.
Right.
Stu,
Absolutely.
do we have time for another story?
We got about 3 minutes or so. If you want to, I know it's hard. Now, we haven't mentioned AI at all this afternoon, Dave, which is kind of unheard of over the last 6-9 months. AI is so dominating the headlines in technology today. But I think a couple quick things that we wanted to mention. One, the governor in California just refused to sign, he vetoed, in fact, sweeping AI legislation that a lot of folks were looking forward to. And it was basically AI regulation. Required safety testing of large AI systems or models. It gave the state attorney general the right to sue companies over serious harm caused by the technologies, like death or property damage. And it mandated a kill switch, Dave, to turn off AI systems in case of potential biowarfare, mass casualties, or property damage. Governor Newsom, however, Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, decided to veto that bill, saying that he thought more study was needed. What's your take on that, Dave? Should that bill have been passed?
Well, one of the reasons he vetoed that bill is people with political power didn't want regulation. And Gavin is looking to run for president as soon as possible. But also because several billionaires, multi-billionaires in most cases, have set out a pile of lies about what was in the legislation. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about Sam Altman at OpenAI and a number of the VCs out there, and Peter Thiel, and a group of very, very wealthy, all men who are mega billionaires, set out a set of lies and financed them with a lot of money. In particular, they said that the law would make it impractical to do open source software. Because when you put something out to the public as open source that anybody can use, there's no way for the company to make sure it's not abused. Fine. But if you actually read the law, it made it very clear that the open source writers and programmers and companies that are supporting them, like Meta and all the Chinese, are only liable for things that they do and things that are in their control. But people like Mark Andreessen, who's made billions on AI, big investor, put a lot of money into a campaign to persuade the governor to veto it.
Interesting, Dave.
Same folk.
You talk about the billionaires. Interesting, Elon Musk, another billionaire with a big financial stake in AI, said that he actually supported the bill. So it was not universal.
The majority of people who are important in AI, including a number of billionaires, think that it is potentially very dangerous. Mm-hmm. I agree. I think the chances of horrors are not that large.
And just
any chance.
Let me just quick footnote: in the absence of federal legislation, other states, Colorado, Maryland, and Illinois, among others, have enacted laws to require disclosure of AI-generated deepfake videos in political ads. and ban use of facial recognition and other AI tools in hiring and protection of consumers from discrimination.
Oh, we
May
don't
I
have
borrow
any
some?
more time on this show, but
Yeah,
the
yeah, I know.
examples of the prejudice and the bias built into the way AI systems are used are legion. But I
Yeah.
got one story to give that's not an AI
Okay,
story.
we just got a minute,
But
Dave.
yeah, it's simple enough. A fellow in Utah is going to jail. It's happened after the story I sent you because he has been cloning giant sheep who are endangered species. He had somebody go to, I think it was Kazakhstan, where there are some of the Marco Polo sheep, Ovis amnimpoli, harvest some cells from them, brought them to him in Montana, where he owns a hunter's reserve. And we know Dolly the sheep was cloned, and he cloned
Wow.
this endangered species from in order to have the sheep available for hunters to kill.
Jesus Christ.
Now, he turned out to be breaking a whole number of laws because you're not allowed to bring endangered species in the United States in the first place. He's 81, and even the prosecutor wanted to give him community service, but the judge decided to send him to jail for 6 months because he was so horrified. Stu, did you look at the pictures I sent you of one of these sheep?
Yeah, they were kind of imposing looking creatures with big horns. I mean, they have something else. Yeah, I did see that. But Dave, we're out of time here. We gotta shut it down. That's interesting. You know, we talked many years ago when they first had the Dolly story about cloning, and now you see it raising its head again. In this case, by an entrepreneur or hunter who wants to populate his hunting preserve. Interesting.
With a
Anyway,
really gorgeous giant sheep,
yeah,
of which there are not enough in the world for them to go and hunt
yeah, I can
legally.
see cloning them to help perpetuate the species, but wow, okay. Nevertheless, this has been Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM every Wednesday, 5 to 6 p.m. with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid. Also available on the web at WHCR.org. Tune in. You just might learn something. Thanks and good night.